What's up? Stefan here from Be a Python Dev, and I thought I would do something slightly different for this video. Aside from all the coding videos and kind of career coaching videos I like to do, I want to start doing occasional React videos, and I want to call it Debunking Disinformation. I've seen a lot of YouTube content creators out there claiming that they're big in the software niche. 46K subscribers, that's quite a bit. Seen some other people, 200K, 500K. We're gonna get into their videos in this series, all claiming that they know the secret recipe for tech, or that tech is mean and tech fails everyone, or businesses are bad. So I want to watch some of these videos, react to them, give my opinion on the things they're saying as a senior engineer in big tech that has been in the world for 10 years. I have a 5-year software engineering degree. That makes me old as shit. Not really old as shit, but I've been through some things. I've seen some experience. Slightly different opinions than a lot of the people that will be watching.
Laser focus.
And
what's up? My name is James.
Awesome power to him. He says he's a senior software engineer. Senior software engineer where I work is different than a senior software engineer in a lot of other places. For instance, in big tech, a senior software is probably the equivalent to a principal or a senior principal at other smaller firms. So good that you got the title. I would be interested in seeing where this guy works to figure out what that title means, what his roles and responsibilities are, how much of an engineer he is versus a developer, which those are two pretty different things, and they come with different salaries. So, we'll just watch this video, see what he says.
I went from being an underwater construction worker to a self-taught senior software engineer at a large multinational company. I'm going to share with you the exact strategies that I use to quickly learn how to become a software developer, the programming language and tech stack you should learn in 2021.
Interesting, he says the programming language and the tech stack that you should learn in 2021. You really want to learn computer science skills. That's a little more relevant than language and tech stack. And we're going to go into this video. I've seen part of it already and kind of, again, debunk some of what he's saying.
The resources that I recommend, the things that you should avoid, as well as tips on how to...
Actually, I need to check on something. All right, let's get back into this.
How to become more competitive and tabs. To get your first programming job.
I may have to
the key to success is to work smart, not hard. These are the tips I wish someone had told me. I'm only going to ask you to do one thing, and it's not to subscribe or hit the like button. What I want you to do after you watch this video is to actually do something based on what you learn. Take the leap and see if programming can change your life like it did mine. And we're starting now.
Props that programming changed this guy's life. I think programming has the capability to change a lot of people's life. Programming and tech aren't going anywhere. If anything, there may be different versions of it as you see AI, machine learning, data science become more prevalent. Web developers aren't as needed as they used to be now that there's platforms like WordPress where a business owner can make their own website. So tech shifts. You can just shift with it, stay current with the trends, do some investigation. You can just Google what are the top tech jobs or what tech field should I be studying. So there's always that. And I understand, this is without going to school. School's not an option for everyone. I think this guy talks about his family. So more power to him for wanting to better himself for the sake of his family. There's nothing wrong with that. If you do not necessarily, if you don't have a family yet, if you're younger, if you're able to get federal loans and stuff, there's a lot of benefits to college, which I can talk about those as well. But let's get back into this.
I took the leap into programming. My first thought was to go back to school and get another degree in computer science, but it just didn't really make sense. It's going to be really expensive, take a lot of time, and I already had a family that I needed to be providing for. So I did.
All right, so your computer science degree is going to be really expensive. This is kind of true, especially depending on the university. Like if you go to Massachusetts Institute of Technology, it's going to be $40,000-ish a year. What I did is I went to a community college for a year and a half, finished all my prerequisites like calculus, English, some basic engineering, some philosophy classes. Then I went to the University of Toledo, which is a cheaper school. It was about 8,000 ish a year. So I got some grants, I got some minor scholarships. I worked my internships, which paid for my part of my later years, and altogether, it only cost like $20-ish thousand, and now I'm definitely making more than $20,000 a year. So it may be expensive, but depending on the major and how much you push yourself, computer science definitely has a good return on investment compared to some other degrees. Back into this.
What a lot of self-taught programmers do, and I went and looked at the curriculum for a computer science degree and started to map out all the things that I needed to learn in order to be able to compete with computer science grads. That was a huge mistake for me. I was feeling so overwhelmed by the amount of information that I needed to learn that I never finished actually writing out that plan. So I started by...
Okay, so he looked at all the courses that he would need for a computer science degree. He tried studying them himself, he got overwhelmed, ended up failing, kind of worked for a couple years. That is another reason why colleges and schools are a pretty good way, because they do things in a structured way so that you're not overwhelmed. If you try to study Calc 3 without studying Calc 1, it's going to be really hard. If you try to study object-oriented programming and nonlinear programming before learning basic programming, it's going to be harder to grasp. So with the way colleges are structured and focused in 12 credit hour semesters, 18 if you really want to push yourself, it makes it easier to set yourself up for achievement. And that's why schools are a pretty good thing. You can also just get a 2-year degree, and then you can go work, and you can finish your 3rd and 4th years like kind of part-time, and it might take a little bit longer, and a lot of companies pay some tuition reimbursement. So, that's another opportunity, another option for you to finish a computer science degree if you are interested in that. So definitely don't sway away from school. It's a good option. I went when I was 24, a little older, and things still work out.
By picking up a book on C# as well as a book on algorithms, and I quickly started spreading myself too thin. There were so many different complex things to learn that within a couple of weeks, I closed that book and I never opened it again. I had failed my first attempt at becoming a programmer. Fortunately, when I was doing underwater construction, the next couple of years really...
It was interesting you said I was doing underwater construction and he showed a picture of the Hoover Dam. It makes me wonder, were you constructing the Hoover Dam? If so, props to you.
Sucked. It was tight for me financially. I did not enjoy what I was doing at all, and it was taking a toll on me emotionally, so that prompted me to give programming another try. This time...
So one thing that stands out in any kind of career, if you're not enjoying what you're doing, you're going to have a hard time in that career field. Definitely spend some time doing some personal introspection into figuring out what it is you enjoy doing. What is your mission statement in life? What are your values and your goals? How can you align your career in a way that sets yourself up to do that? One of my values and goals is trying to help society through products and learning, which is why I do this channel, and which is why I work in tech, because I work on a product that millions of people use. And it brings me joy to hear stories of ways that product has improved people's lives. So if you don't enjoy what you're doing, spend some time figuring out what it is that you do enjoy, and then pursue a field or a career in that field. And hopefully it'll be a lot easier to wake up every morning and you don't end up having the Sunday scaries, as I heard someone say, where you spend all Sunday realizing that you have to work the next day and you end up not enjoying your Sunday either because you're not going to enjoy the rest of the week. And that's just not a way to live, man. Anyways.
I would do things differently. I needed to figure out the fastest way to become a software developer, and this approach needed to be laser focused. So
that's his good YouTube voice right there. I needed to figure out the fastest way to do things differently. I needed to be laser focused. A lot of buzzwords there. There's no fastest way to do anything. There are different ways to do things that work for different people in different ways. Some people are visual learners, some people are audible learners, some people are learning from doing. So one size fits all approach. All right, that's not gonna work. You need to figure out what works for you and what you enjoy doing.
Listen up, this is the very first key to success. Don't try to compete with computer science grads. There's a lot of them and they have the paper to back them up. Instead, you need to be focusing your efforts on some.
So it's interesting, he said rule number 1, don't try to compete with computer science grads. So, which if you look in this section right here, how to compete with computer science graduates. So he says don't do it, but later in this video he says how to compete with them, which kind of just goes against rule number 1 that you just said. But that's not necessarily true. There are people at my company that have majors from different programs. It's an engineering field, so if you have a electrical engineering degree, a civil engineering degree, a chemical engineering degree, and you have the mindset to succeed in engineering, which generally most of those people are all pretty smart, you can do pretty well in almost any field that you decide to apply to. If you would have difficulty in an engineering program, and there's computer science, there's IT, there's information security, there's other systems that are set up that are less math-based. And then there's always this self-guided approach, which, yes, you will be competing, that have shown that they've gone through 4 years of work to do something in a field in which they're applying for. You can do the same self-guided approach, but it's going to be a lot more challenging, actually. So there's not an easiest way to become a software developer, as this video is titled. Again, we're going to talk about this a little more.
Some area where they are weak so that you can have a competitive advantage. In a minute, I'll share the exact programming language and tech stack that you should focus on. At this phase of your learning, it is super important.
Again, there's that exact programming language thing that makes me cringe. Well, I'll show you why.
To fight the gnawing feeling that you need to know everything about programming, because that's just not true. Taking the jack of all trades approach will just mean that you're a mediocre dev without a degree. Imagine a situation where an employer is looking for someone with a very specific skill set to solve a specific problem. If you have that skill, you stand a very good chance of beating out a computer science generalist. The second tip is to make sure that
So I just said if a manager is looking for a very specific thing in a very specific field, you kind of have to know that ahead of time, wouldn't you? And that might be pretty hard. Tech is always evolving. There's different frameworks that come up every few years. So for that, in a way, it is kind of okay to be a generalist. If you have extremely good problem-solving skills, you can apply those problem-solving skills in anything. And I got a job at my company, which they were looking for C++ devs, and I didn't even know C++. I just knew computer science and engineering. And with that, they figure if you know a couple different coding languages, that you can apply those principles to any new coding languages. So it's for that reason why this specialist approach is kind of not that great, because if a person comes in and they don't know JavaScript that this guy is talking about, but they have solved other software related issues, they've created applications, they worked with customers to get requirements, they've created designs, but they don't necessarily know JavaScript, those other skills are going to be more pronounced, that the hiring manager is probably still going to give that kind of person the job and just assume that they can learn JavaScript, which the majority of the time those kind of people can. So, but if you are very specialized in React and you're applying to a React.js job, yes, that will look good for you, but you need to be able to communicate how you can provide benefit to the customer, why this manager should hire you, what problems you solve, what kind of projects you've done with this. If you just learn React.js and you haven't actually built several things in React.js, that interview is going to be pretty hard.
You focus on an area that is growing, has a lot of demand. Going laser focused into the areas that aren't saturated by computer science degrees is the best way to break into this industry. Now let's look at
this guy is saying that React and web frameworks are not super saturated by people with computer science degrees. If you think about it, a computer science program probably has maybe 50 to 150 graduating people per year. There are thousands of colleges. That's a lot of computer scientists going into the job market every year. And a lot of them do know JavaScript. For example, if I go to University of Toledo, computer science technology, I'm pretty sure one of the classes in the coursework required for this is a web application related program, which is done in JavaScript. I'm not gonna dig into it right now since I don't have it like off the top of my head, but what you really need to do to set yourself apart is to set yourself apart. Get the good skills, have the good stories, be able to tell how you were able to create this web application for someone that did this thing and went above and beyond their expectations, and you have a deep knowledge of the web application framework. The code was organized well, it's tested well, it's able to apply to multiple types of use cases. You're storing all of the data in some kind of backend. You're using caching, you're using message queues, you're aware of low latency transactions. You're able to track all of the actual API calls through this metrics engine to know where your things are failing and to be able to profile metrics to see what things are being used. You have these deployment systems in place where you can do A/B testing of certain features in the web application. You're automatically deploying things through continuous integration, continuous development. When you understand all of that stuff and you can talk about it in a way that you pass the sniff test, then you set yourself apart. And you can do all of that without going to actual university. You just build stuff, learn about all the things. Maybe one day I'll put together a complete web application of things to learn and things that you can build to demonstrate those skills. And that takes time. It's not easy.
Programming language and tech stack more specifically, and then we're going to go even more narrow down into those with recommendations on what you should focus on. You got to remember that with computer science students, most of them are going to be spending a lot of their time learning languages like C, C++, Java, Python, Scala, and there's a bunch of other programs.
So in my university, I did learn C++, a little bit of C, Java, some Python. They didn't actually focus on JavaScript, but if you know those four, you can go through a JavaScript tutorial and pretty much understand the syntax in a matter of like an hour or so, and kind of work through some tutorials and build a web application in a day. So again, the more you actually know about programming, the more you can apply it to other programming languages and things. For example, I know some mobile application from work that I did at Diebold, and then I got asked to do some other kind of mobile application at my new project, which I was using Cassandra then, but this new project was in Swift, and I had to build a library in the iOS language using Xcode and deploy this Swift app, and I was able to do it in like a week or two, just not knowing anything, just doing it all from scratch. So again, knowing how to build stuff and using that knowledge to be able to build new stuff is more important than trying to compete with the computer science majors.
Programming languages that are often associated with the backend. What we don't want to do is focus on learning a language that you're going to be applying to jobs directly against those graduates. So the language that I actually recommend is going to be JavaScript on the front end. Most computer science students just don't learn a lot about the front end.
Another thing, cold applying to jobs without a computer science degree is actually probably really difficult. I wouldn't know because I can't speak from experience. And that's another reason university was really good, is because my computer science program required co-ops and internships. And they had companies that they would work with, and they had placements for your co-ops. I actually had bronchitis really bad the 2 months that I was supposed to be applying, and I ended up missing some of my interviews. And one of my advisors actually put me in touch with a job, or with a company that still needed to fill a couple internship positions. I had a quick 20-minute phone interview, and then they gave me the internship, and it ended up being pretty easy because of the connections and the networking experience that you get at universities and code boot camps, different things like that. And through that job, my manager ended up going to the big tech company, and he referred me, and then I kind of got a foot in the door. Maybe it was a lucky career path, but I had other options that I was doing to end up in that same position anyways, by getting accepted into a master's program and pursuing, continual education while working, which I'm a heavy advocate for continued education. And I realize I'm at 20 minutes and I've only gotten through 3.5 minutes. But again, this is a kind of touchy subject to me. And it's all tough work. And that's why computer science and software engineering is a pretty lucrative field, because a lot of people either don't want to do the work, or it's hard because computer coding is very ambiguous. You're building things that you can't physically touch and see, and it's pretty abstract, which also makes the barrier to entry harder. Web programming is a little easier because when you make a box and a button, you actually get to see them and touch them. But the intricacies of the data that flows through the application and the user experience ends up being challenging and things that you need to deal with.
So it's a great place that meets that criteria of not having a lot of guys with degrees going after it. It's in demand, there's a lot of growth, and there's not enough highly qualified software engineers. It's also cool because if you're not really big on math, then this is one area of programming where you usually don't have to have really deep math skills to have a successful career. Front-end development is such a...
Okay, and if you have really deep math skills, then you're probably in an engineering program. And because of being in an engineering program, you're taking really hard math classes. So if you get a good GPA in a engineering program, then it generally shows you're pretty smart and able to learn new concepts and things. Relatively easy with some hard work, and that will give some of those people kind of a natural edge. Sad to say, if it's harder to pick up new concepts, you'll just have to work harder. So not an easiest way. And for instance, another kind of really heavy math career, data science. So data science salary starting out 78 to 130, 140 to 220. Let's say like a senior data science salary, 100 to 350K. You're gonna the estimated total pay for a senior data scientist is 161. This probably doesn't include stocks. So those kind of majors pay pretty high, where a web developer salary, an entry level front end web developer, 58K. So you can get the job, you can break into being a programmer without the degree, but definitely the degree pays off a little bit with the extra work. Consider it a personal investment per se.
A huge area with so much to learn that it's still not focused enough. We want to go even more laser focused, and to do that, we're going to pick a framework.
This is how Fiverr changed my life.
Ads.
My name is Drew, and I'm the face and hands behind.
What is a framework? Well, as a programmer, when we're using any given programming language, there's some things that we do over and over again that could be very complex or...
So this is one of the things that I want to talk about, like the difference between a software developer and a software engineer. He's talking about learning a framework, which is React. Software engineers at Facebook created the React framework. And it's a way to simplify web development and JavaScript development for a front end application for the business logic. Sorry, I'm saying that very badly, but I'm just trying to improv this. I haven't really prepped a script or anything ahead of time. And this is not a very flattering pause for him. There we go. Now he looks like a rock star. So the engineer makes the framework, and then other engineers take frameworks and they build new frameworks on top of them. Like, for instance, WordPress and Salesforce. So people made platforms on top of JavaScript to provide platforms for other companies to be able to make web applications without fully understanding web application development. Simplified them. So developers can make programs using frameworks that's made by engineers that use browsers made by other engineers that use an operating system used by other engineers. So you have layers and layers and layers of abstraction. And the more complex of the layer and the harder the layer usually coordinates to a higher salary per se. But doesn't necessarily stop you from being a software developer. And with this approach, you can get into the top layer. And if you keep specializing and learning deep and being able to apply those business problems to new areas and domains, and you get very comfortable in a corporate environment, then you can, keep going down in the layers and specialize even more. I wouldn't say learning one web framework is necessarily gonna make you a shoo-in to become a software developer, but it definitely helps. It's a way to get your foot in the door, and you may take a lot of interviews to do it, but ultimately it can definitely happen.
Complex, and a framework is a tool that does all that stuff for you behind the scenes, and it just provides a simpler way for you to do that bit of functionality. So my recommendation is that you become a specialist and that you focus 100% on learning a framework called React. It is a framework that is really, really popular right now. When I got started, it was AngularJS was the thing, and by focusing on a popular framework, that was huge in helping me to break into the industry, get my first interview, and get my first job. To be successful with React, you're gonna have to learn JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. You can think of HTML as kind of like Lego blocks. They're the building blocks that provide structure to a web page or application. The CSS is going to be the rules that kind of...
A lot of times you don't really fully need to know CSS because there's frameworks like Twitter Bootstrap that make the designs and stuff. With some of the web application work I'm doing internal portals where the design doesn't necessarily matter as much as the functionality that's being provided by the web application. But if you are, even if you look at like Facebook isn't an extremely attractive website by any means, so much as it is a functional way of putting people together in touch. And a lot of times, if you are making something really visually appealing, like if you're doing a web application for a brand, like maybe you're making the Coca-Cola webpage, they will have actual designers create the CSS, and then they'll give you the style sheets, and then you import those and convert them. So just understanding like the web flow of that. I don't want to go through this whole video given how long this has been, but there are a few other things I want to touch upon. We'll finish this section. We'll talk about some of the recommended software things, and then how to compete with computer science graduates. I haven't pre-watched that, so we'll actually go through that too.
To define the look and feel of those blocks, like how big they are, what color they are, where they're positioned. JavaScript is going to be the glue that holds everything together. It is the programming language of the front end. It's what handles getting data, and it's what handles the interactions on the page. Learning HTML is pretty straightforward and easy to do, but with CSS, there's a lot of quirks and just weird behavior stuff that you end up having to deal with, and a lot of browser compatibility issues. If you end up working at more of like a website mill or a marketing type site that makes a lot of smaller websites for companies, then you definitely will probably be getting into some of the more advanced CSS stuff early on. But fortunately, you do not have to be a CSS wizard to get started. In fact, at a lot of companies, especially bigger companies, oftentimes there will be libraries, component libraries that the software developers have built already for that company that provides most of the components that you're going to need, and then you will just be supplementing that with some of the more basic CSS. And because of that, I'm only going to want you to focus on certain parts of CSS. JavaScript is huge as well. There's so much that you can learn and so much you can do with it that it's easy to get lost in the weeds. One of my biggest regrets was that I was reading several JavaScript books from cover to cover, and I forgot so much stuff that I read. We don't want to do that.
So that was a key thing that he kind of said. He was reading JavaScript books from cover to cover. First of all, I don't think anyone actually reads JavaScript books from cover to cover. It's much better to learn by doing, like actually build things with the JavaScript and make those things be cohesive, like actually make a simulated blog site or something. I think that's how I learned Ruby on Rails, which is also how I learned JavaScript. And then I converted all of that into Angular, and then I created my own frameworks in Angular for making ATM-based applications at Diebold. And if you do all that, then you end up kind of with a deep knowledge of the software development process, and then you can take that to other places a couple years later and kind of level up your salaries and positions and the kind of companies you're working for and the benefits you get and all that fun stuff. Where was I going with this? I don't know.
You want to stay focused on the most essential things that are going to help you get up and running and building applications, and you can learn that other stuff later on. I call that just-in-time learning, where you learn it when you need it. I also don't want...
Yeah, just-in-time learning, learn it when you need it. Even where I work at right now, I kind of assume that most of the people we hire aren't going to understand our technology. They aren't going to understand the things we specifically work on. They might understand the core concepts in the programming language, but everything is very specific and internal to our company. So we normally kind of like factor in time for people to onboard onto the projects that they're working on, and just assume that there's going to be some ramp up, some onboarding difficulties, some hand holding that's going to need to be done. So as mid and senior level engineers, we try to provide support for those engineers so that they can ramp up quickly. In the restaurant business, which I worked in before I went back to college, you call it setting up your team for success, which means if you're working the morning shift, you want to make sure everything is prepped and cleaned and restocked before the evening shift guys come on, so that they're not going to completely die once the dinner rush comes. And you want to do the same thing for your team in software development. Set them up for success and assume that people are going to learn on the job, and they're going to learn by doing. So with that, build projects, don't suffer or don't fall into the cycle of analysis paralysis where you just, I need to learn this. I need to learn this. No, just build a few things, be able to communicate about the things you built and why you built them and why you're interested and what value you can provide to the company. And with that, you can probably get the job with or without the CS degree.
I want you spending a lot of time working on learning backend stuff. There are services out there like Firebase that will provide all the backend stuff for you to integrate with, and will handle it so you don't have to worry about it. That way you can stay focused on learning how to do things on the front end and becoming an expert at the front end so that you can avoid wasting time. I'm going to talk about some of the courses that
learning backend stuff and learning databases and learning the difference between SQL, NoSQL, RDS, GraphQL. Actually, RDS is SQL. So S3, different document stores. I mean, I know S3 is not actually a database, but it is a place for file storage. If you learn all of those things, again, not a flattering picture of him. That'll give you a leg up during your interview, because you understand different technologies and when to apply those technologies. Like if you're a hammer, or if you're a carpenter, you don't learn just how to use a hammer, right? You learn how to use a hammer. You learn how to use framing rulers, a tape measure, a screwdriver, air guns, saws, all this stuff, and you understand when to use which thing. And with that, you'll get a job building a house. Kind of similar in computer science. If you know what these languages are for, and you roughly know, basic things in the different languages, but you understand the theory of algorithms, code organization, system design, with all of that, then you will be a stronger candidate at a versatile range of different positions. So he's already kind of talked about dive deep on React.js, and then by doing this, it puts you in a better position because not many people are learning React.js. So with that, I'm going to switch to a different scene here. Make sure I use the right one, otherwise it's just going to look wonky. Where is it? Oh, it's all the way at the top. All right, don't mind that. we're gonna keep this small. You know what? I'm gonna go back to the other scene. Maybe this still works. All right, so here is React.js courses on Udemy. Udemy is kind of a platform where you can learn things for 25 bucks or 15 bucks. And if you'll see, this React.js course has 5,900,000 learners. That is not a small number by any means, right? That's a lot of people. And this is probably global, so take that in with consideration as well. It's not just US. Maybe the US number is like 500,000. But even with that, if we go to Indeed.com, just the basic job search website, and we type in React.js. You guys saw that? You probably know my email addresses now. It's fine. How many jobs for React.js in not just New York, everywhere? Everywhere in the United States, 50,000 jobs, 5 million learners. You know what? Maybe, you know, it's just first world or computer science heavy nations that learn React.js. So maybe India, Nigeria, UK, Poland, United States. So of those 5, you know, maybe 1,250,000 is US people that know React.js, and there's 47,000 jobs available right now. That's a lot of competition. This isn't going to be an easy shoe-in guaranteed way to break into software development. It's going to be hard. You're going to need to learn more stuff, you know. You're going to need to learn the hard skills, the soft skills, the communication, the leadership, you know, being able to deal with customers, balance requirements, be a good team player, dealing with confrontation. You know, tell me about a time when you've dealt with a difficult coworker, you know, those stories.
Recommend. But just a word of caution when it comes to picking courses. There are courses out there that are the everything you need to know about XYZ, and those are courses that, like the books, you just want to avoid those because you'll get off into the weeds and it'll be distracting and you're going to forget most of it. But the most important thing you should do here when we talk about these courses is you should actually do the projects, and you should attempt to do them before looking at the provided examples so that you're actually getting some real world experience trying to think through and solve problems, because that is going to be the best way that you can learn.
Completely agree with everything he said right there.
How to write code. And I don't want this video to get really long, so we're going to be moving through this section fairly quickly with a lot of information. So definitely you'll want to rewatch the section, take notes, and I'll leave links in the description below to these different projects.
I didn't pause it. It didn't happen in instantaneous time. Here we go. Let's try that again.
For a job, one of the best ways that you can compete with computer science graduates and with bootcamp graduates is by having a really nice portfolio of quality projects that you've done. You don't want to just fill it up with a bunch of super simplistic projects. A bunch of medium difficulty, high quality projects are going to be much better than a single mediocre large project, and having just one project is going to scream newbie. Start small and build up from there. Like each project, pick something that's a little harder and a little harder. Things that to build that are going to solve problems that are related specifically to your own hobby.
All right, so I said to compete with computer science major people like myself, build projects, build lots of projects, create a good portfolio with projects and more projects, and make the projects more difficult each time. Which, to create a really thorough portfolio, you know, you could be spending 1 month on each of these projects. I'd say maybe a year to have 12 really comprehensive, amazing projects that you can talk about in an interview, which that's a year of time. If you're working as a underwater construction person with a family, you know, it might even take a little longer to be able to build up that portfolio. So again, this isn't necessarily the easiest way, but it would work, and you don't have to go to school if you're just building and understanding what you're building, and you're able to talk about it. And maybe at your previous jobs, you've learned The other things like communication skills, dealing with customers, interacting with coworkers, and you're able to talk about scenarios in which you've dealt with difficult interactions or have managed a team. Maybe you were a kitchen trainer or a kitchen manager in a previous job, and some of those skills kind of pivot into being able to lead a small team of developers or work well with them. Then all of that kind of compiles. If you are fresh out of high school, you don't have much experience, maybe you took a Python class in high school that lasted 3 months, and maybe you build a few things in that. I don't know if you need to take programming in high school. It would make sense if you did. We learned a little bit of programming in high school. Anyways, that's a different subject. But if you're fresh out of high school, it's going to be much harder to compete with someone with a computer science degree or someone with previous work experience that has spent 1 or 2 years self-teaching themselves concepts of programming. They've built projects, they've learned algorithms, they've gotten a 1000 rating on Leak Code and all that other fun stuff, so they're able to pass the interview. But ultimately, I think the biggest advice is just learn and be curious and have a passion for what you're doing. If you have a drive for making web applications that are used by tens of thousands to millions of users to simplify something in their life, and that is something really rewarding to you, you will be much more successful than someone that absolutely hates to code that just wants to do it for money. So that's my long-term summary. Let me know if you guys like that format. If you're still here, which I guarantee no one is, please leave a subscribe because you are a real one. And with that said, I'll see you guys.